How's it going, everybody? My name is Aaron Young, and today I want to tell you about one of my favorite camera systems. And it's a system that I think is criminally overlooked, underrated, and kind of being forgotten about today, and that would be Canon's EOS M system. This would be the M5 right here in front of you. The thing about this system is, ever since the EOS R was announced and the RP came out, being a very, very affordable full-frame camera, most people have figured, why would I want to go for a crop sensor? Why would I get the EOS M system when the R is Canon's future? I can see that from quite a few perspectives, but I'm here to kind of tell you why I think that you should consider the EOS M system, especially if it's your first camera. And even if it's not your first camera, if you're looking for something a little different to use or something that's just easier to travel with, you might really want to consider this. Personally, it has been my professional workhorse for the last year or so. I've been exclusively using M system cameras. I went from a 5D original full frame for portraits and a 7D for sports and motorsport photography. I went from those to the M system. And a quick little story about how I ended up doing that is, essentially I got a 7D after my 5D because I had started shooting motorsports, and the 7D was a very good camera, but I found it just didn't feel, it just seemed to be like lacking a little bit as far as tracking goes and sharpness. Like if I had to go above ISO like 640, it started to just lose a lot of quality really fast to me. And I'm not sure if it was an issue with my specific camera or not. I've heard so many great things about the 7D, and I still maintain the 7D being a great deal today, since you can get one for like $200. But for me, it just didn't work. So I ended up selling it and going back to just using my 5D for a while. Well, fast forward a couple of months, and my 5D ended up actually failing me on a portrait shoot. And normally I like to have two cameras, one as a backup. But at the moment I did not. I had sold that 7D. I hadn't quite worked out what I was going to get as a second camera, and my 5D ends up failing. So now I'm left with no cameras, a load of EF glass, and I have a shoot 2 weeks from then. So luckily that shoot was almost over when the camera failed on me, but I had to get something fast for the next shoot. So I ended up browsing. I browsed eBay, I browsed Amazon for good deals. I wanted something Canon so I could use the glass I have, and I came across the best deal I could find. I came across this, which was the M5, and this guy was open box, basically brand new, for $285, free shipping. And I could not believe how good of a deal it was. I had used EOS M cameras before. I actually had the original EOS M, but was very disappointed by it. The autofocus was pretty, honestly, the original EOS M's autofocus is pretty horrible. Picture live view in like a Canon 5D Mark II focusing, and that was basically the EOS M's best focusing. It could not focus like an SLR. So I was a little skeptical with the M5, but I saw the dual pixel autofocus and all that, so I figured I'd give it a shot. For $285, if I could get it, get my shoots done, I would use it for a little while, sell it, and get another DSLR, or even possibly get an EOS R or RP. Well, fast forward a little ways, I got through with that shoot, and I just started using the camera for daily work. Like I take photos almost every day. It's pretty much my full-time thing. My full-time career is taking photos. And I just fell in love with this camera, okay? So I'm sitting here adapting like my 80 to 200 2.8L to it, and of course it's incredibly front heavy. I'm adapting my primes to it and everything, but the results I'm getting are just amazing. Like the focus is so good, especially for the price. Like I did not expect to get a camera that had like seemingly top class autofocus for $285. But when you look at the original price of the M5, it makes more sense. It was closer to $1,000. It might have even been a little more. And I can understand, it seems to me like Canon might have been marketing the M5 as their mirrorless version of like the 80D, which it seems to share quite a few specs with. And when you consider that the 80D is still going used for substantially more than that, it looks on paper like the bargain of the century. Okay, so what are the downsides to this? There have to be downsides. You can't get an 80D in a mirrorless body with top class autofocus without sacrificing something. Okay, well, one big sacrifice is going to be the size. This thing is tiny, and I also have the M6 filming right now, and I'll take a little B-roll of that for you to see how that looks. And you might see on the M6 that I've got something on mounted to it, and that would be a small rig. And I'll show you what a small rig is in. So this is the small rig. It is a cage. These screws are for attachments, don't worry about those. It is a cage for this camera, and you might notice the biggest difference right there. You see, that's the original grip right there, and this is huge. It feels like you're holding a small DSLR. This cage made the difference for me. Okay, I loved the camera, but was still on the verge about whether I was going to keep it or get an EOS R system camera because of the small size with my big lenses. Okay, like I sold my 80-200, but I did end up with another large lens, the 85-1.2L. This was my dream lens, but it did not balance properly on this camera at all. Like, it felt pretty horrible to grip the camera and try to grip the lens at the same time. Well, the small rig definitely fixed that. This is using a Mikey or mic adapter. The small rig gives it so much more heft that I'm now confident to carry this one-handed when I'm doing street photography. I could never have said that before because this lens is my baby, and this is the one L lens I will probably never sell unless something happened to it, because I adore this lens. But without that small rig, I never would have been able to carry the camera around like that. So that was a huge advantage. Like, once I put that on the camera, I think that is something every EOS M shooter should have. Even if you don't use it all the time, it should always be in your bag. Because even if you're shooting the native glass, which is substantially smaller, you're gonna notice that grip gives you so much like extra heft to the camera, and not only that, it being made of metal, it gives it a lot more rigidity. So that was basically the one thing I missed about my DSLRs, and that has been cured. Like that $65 piece completely fixed the whole issue I had with the camera. I don't really have any other personal downsides to the camera, but I'm sure some others may see some downsides. The crop sensor is considered a downside these days, which I don't really see that. I mean, modern crop sensors, especially these with the 24 megapixel sensor, are capable of taking some stunning photos. And throughout this video, you're going to see the photos I'm talking about that are my favorites. And I consider stunning. I consider them pretty much, I don't consider anything from my DSLR days to be as good as what I've taken with these. And granted, the DSLR I had was a 5D with a 12 megapixel sensor from like 2004. But I came to learn that full frame is not everything. I think if you have a modern enough camera and you have the right glass, you're not going to be wanting for any kind of like extra depth of field or anything. Okay, like, let me tell you right now, I've used this 85-1.2 on a film camera, and nailing the focus on a full frame equivalent it's doable. It's definitely doable. I've seen, tons of photographers have made use of it over the years, but to me, it's just super shallow at 1.2. I usually always stop down to 1.8 to get a sharp, to get good focus on a subject. But with the crop sensor, I can shoot this thing wide open at 1.2 all day. And granted, with the crop sensor, you do lose a little bit of light, so technically it's not really 1.2. Some would argue it is. I think it might as well be 1.2 because it lets in an insane amount of light. But I'm sure the purists would disagree with me. Anyway, the biggest advantages I see with full frame: depth of field, low light. That's about it. Almost everything else can be done with smaller sensors these days, as long as as long as you know what you're doing, and honestly, as long as you're happy with how the camera feels in the hand, you can probably get the perfect shot. You can probably get anything you want with any camera, as long as it's a camera you're happy with in your hands. So I would say don't worry about all those people telling you have to shoot full frame to be a professional, because honestly, I mean, I'm still not exactly, a fully achieved, like, I'm not going to be retiring anytime soon. I'm still learning quite a lot. But I've been shooting full time and paying my bills with my photography for the last year, maybe a little more. I mean, after I lost my job, it was my only source of income. And even with the things that went on in 2020, if you're watching this in the future, I've still managed to make a small living for myself. And, and honestly, none of my clients have ever cared that I'm not using a full frame camera. Okay, and if they did, they're probably not people I would be looking to work with anyway, because they're probably not looking for talent as much as they are looking for specs. Okay, and I think the biggest thing about photography is talent. You can do whatever. I have a Pentax Q with that little tiny sensor, and I've taken photos and sold photos with it. But that's just what I wanted to say about sensor size. I really don't see a big disadvantage to it. The biggest thing is low light, but if you have lenses that let in a decent amount of light, that's not going to be too big of an issue regardless. And that moves me on to another thing, and that is, when I got into the M system, I originally had all my EF glass, huge lenses, 80 to 200 2.8, 85 1.2, the big stuff. And I had a 35 to 350 as well. When I got into this system, I used them for a while, and then I started testing out some of the native glass, like this guy right here. This is the 55 to 200 kit lens. Okay, compared this to my 35 to 350 super zoom lens, obviously the 35 to 350's got more range and is more, is more universal, I'd say. But it was so unwieldy huge. When I could carry this 55 to 200, and then supposedly there's a 100 to 300 coming out in the future for the EOS M system, I could carry both of those and it would still be less weight than that one lens was. So I ended up actually selling quite a few of my EF lenses and jumping on board with the native EOS M glass, except for the old 85. I'm gonna keep that probably forever. This is my dream lens. But the thing is, especially nowadays, there's even more lenses that you would not believe are amazing for this system. Like this guy right here is the 30 1.4 Sigma lens. It's a Sigma Contemporary DCDN, and this lens essentially replaces a full frame Nifty 50. So $285, I believe, or $289 brand new, and it is sharper than any 50 I've ever had. Like, it is, it gives me that about 50 millimeter field of view on the EOS M, and that 1.4 lets in plenty of light for me, and it's pretty sharp at 1.4, so you can take beautiful portraits with it. Granted, you probably wouldn't want to take headshots. If you're going to be doing that, I would get you either an 85 millimeter, which would be like a 135 equivalent, or get the Sigma 56 1.4. That would be a perfect lens. And Canon, I believe, has also announced a 52 millimeter f2, which would be more than likely a very good portrait candidate as well, but we'll have to see about that. Hopefully I'll be able to test one when it comes out. So basically, another thing I wanted to talk about is price. Okay, the EOS M system is more affordable than ever, and it is, I mean, I already mentioned earlier in the video, I believe I already mentioned earlier in the video, if I did not mention earlier in the video, $285 for this M5 new open box camera. That's a ridiculous deal, okay? You can't buy a DSLR with specs like this for that price. You can't buy a mirrorless with specs like this for that price. It shoots full 1080p up to 60 FPS. It's, of course it's not, it's not raw or anything, but it's fantastic video. I mean, this video is being shot on an M6 with the same specs. So the main difference between the M6 and the M5 being no viewfinder on the M6, but you might prefer that. Anyway, when I got the M5, it was hell of a deal. I started to love it. I got into using it so much that I started looking at a second body, and I got this M6. This M6 was less than that. It was $250, brand new, never opened, and it included its kit lens, which I could not believe I got a camera that included a kit lens for that kind of price. Of course, you'd have to shop around a little bit because that is not the normal price, but they are pretty low in price these days. And honestly, any M system camera after the M5 and M6 came out is more than worth it. I mean, I think they have the M200, I believe, is one of them. It's like the very entry level. It's got all touchscreen. It doesn't have any physical dials on it, but it still has that dual pixel autofocus for you if you just want a basic camera to take photos with. And that thing is like still going brand new for, I don't believe it's going for much more than $300. I'll have to double check on that. And then they've got the M6 Mark II. If you need a little more resolution out of it, you've got that 32 megapixel sensor. I believe it shoots 4K. I'm not 100% on that. But those aren't the cameras I use. I use the M5 and the original M6. And full HD is plenty for me. And then, of course, you have the M50, which is, I think the M50, honestly, is responsible for saving the EOS M system. The sales on that thing, compared to all the other cameras in the lineup, have been incredible. And I still recommend the M50 to anybody that asks me about a new camera, especially if they're a beginner. And I think now is a better time than any to get into the EOS M, with these new lenses being announced, supposedly coming later this year, possibly next year, and then the rumors of a new EOS M camera coming out. It's looking like it might be like an M7, which will be somewhat of a pro EOS M body, maybe something akin to like the 7D. Hopefully the build quality is something like that, because that's one thing I would love. And it's part of the reason I'm going to stick with the EOS M system, is because I see Canon supporting it, and I want to show people that there's a reason that this system is still around. I think Canon believes in this system, or at the very least at one point they really believed in this system, because they have released some incredible bodies already for it, and honestly the kit lenses are phenomenal. I mean, this 55-200 is way better than the kit 75-300 that came with DSLRs for years. This thing is leaps and bounds better. It's actually pretty sharp. You don't get that low light performance, but I've always thought that if you want low light, you should probably go for a prime lens anyway, and that's what my 85 is for. So if you are looking to get into shooting, or honestly a big advantage to these cameras, traveling. This bag I have is not very big. It carries every lens I have. I have a 50 1.8, I have the 85 1.2, and I have the Sigma 30 1.4. I also have a 7 Artisans fisheye lens, which I will probably talk about at some point. I really like that lens. And then I carry all my lens hoods, all my filters, and all my batteries. And it weighs maybe a quarter what my DSLR setup used to weigh. So a big advantage is going to be on your back. It's not going to kill your back nearly as much as the DSLRs, or honestly even the EOS R system, which from what I can tell is about as big as a normal DSLR. And on the subject of batteries, I will say that is probably the EOS M's downside, is battery life. They use these very small batteries. Let me grab one out real quick. And that would be the LP E17s. They're not very large batteries. Come on, focus for me. They're not very large batteries, but they tend to have decent capacity for what they are. I don't do a lot of video work, so I can't 100% tell you how much video life you're going to get out of it. But for photos, I can shoot mostly all day on one battery, unless I'm like shooting a whole bunch of photos at once. And even when I'm doing that with burst rate, I still probably go through maybe 2-3 batteries. And the best part about these batteries is they are so cheap. I've got 6 of them. okay? And let me tell you, if you get good at just flicking that little battery cover on the bottom, you can change a battery really quickly, especially when you're out in the field, because the small rig, even if you mount the small rig, you've got perfect access to that battery cover, and you just pop it, and then the battery cover will open up, and then you just pop the battery out, pop a new one in, and you're good to go. I would definitely say that this is one of my favorite cameras I've ever used at this point, especially, well, both of them really. This whole system has been just a blast to use, and I've always been a big fan of Canon, but like I said at the beginning, I initially was not a fan of the M system. I had a bad experience at the beginning with the original M, but honestly, ever since these dual pixel EOS M cameras came out, anything after the M5 and M6, it's just amazing. Like, they are phenomenal cameras, hugely underrated. And another thing I should mention is definitely video, because I see videographers using these quite a bit as well. And I have yet to really get into video work. I don't have like a really nice stabilizer or gimbal or anything yet for handheld. So most of what I've done has been tripod and YouTube. I mean, I've been practicing with it, but I haven't uploaded very much, if you can't tell yet. The thing is, though, the video specs on these cameras are pretty good. I mean, okay, if you need 4K, you might as well forget about any. If you have to have 4K, you might as well forget about any of these cameras until maybe a future model, like the M7. Well, M7, we don't know exactly what it's called. You should probably forget about most of these. Maybe the M6 or the M50 could be up your alley, but these cameras really shine at full HD, because if you need a compact full HD setup, these things are wonderful for it. They don't have any in-body stabilization, so you're definitely best getting image stabilized lenses or a gimbal or some kind of stabilizer. But the quality that comes out of these things is wonderful. Like, I've always shot at 1080 24 or 1080 60, and every time I go back and look at the photos, every time I go back and look at the video, it looks pretty excellent, despite my lack of talent in the field of video. The video quality looks really good to me, and I think it's a system I'm going to be able to grow with as a videographer as well. I'm hoping to get into that soon, but even just as a photographer, I've been incredibly happy with it. And I believe if you're a beginner, or even if you're even if you are a kind of a veteran photographer, but you need like a system that's lighter to carry, you should absolutely consider this, especially if you're a Canon fan, because you could have your DSLRs, or you could have your EOS R system as your primary, and then you could keep these as your travel camera or your lightweight setup. Or you could be like me, completely jump ship from all that, end up just on these. And honestly, I can see myself, I think I'm going to be sticking with this system for quite a while, because I've been super happy with it. And I think that you should definitely not count this system out, because I don't think Canon's done with it, and I know that I'm not done with it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, this is technically the end of the video, but if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know. If you want me to cover any other EOS M or even possibly other camera related things in the future, let me know. I know this video was kind of rambly, but I wanted to try to make it a little bit more brief and a little bit faster paced than my last one. I'm still working on this YouTube thing. We'll see how it goes. Alright, thanks for watching. Appreciate you guys.